So yeah, basically, so what you're saying is that those radars definitely the energy from these balloons, these UAPs, were hitting their sensors, and most likely it was our forces just ignoring or choosing to ignore
Yes,
some of those
and
overlays.
for to be fair to Space Force, which operates the radars, they are looking primarily for ballistic missiles, and they're also like counting satellites. So that's their primary function. So they may not be looking at anything slower or smaller than what would be a ballistic missile or a satellite in orbit. But the point being is that the radar is capable of getting returns from an object like a balloon, capable of doing so. But perhaps it was being quote unquote filtered on the receiver end, that they were ignoring
Hmm.
the capabilities of the radar to detect. And all they did was to turn on the interest of the humans on the ground operating these radars. And now you will like be interested in these slow moving targets that you used to ignore. So that's the filter. It's not a technical filter. It's a human
Hmm.
factors engineering filter. Pay attention to this now. And something that Kirkpatrick said that my electronic intelligence trained ear heard, he said that we have all of the raw data from the radars. So the raw data is the unfiltered data. So we have the Pentagon spokesman saying, oh, we needed to filter the radar in order to see these things. And then Dr. Kirkpatrick, in testimony before the Senate Armed Services Committee, said that we have all of the raw radar data. And that's the transmitted signal hitting an object and coming back to the receiver before it gets filtered out by the humans on the ground. So he's talking about the radar track files. The digital radar track files has everything in it. If they want to, they can go back in there, as you know, go back in the historical records, the archives of these digital track files, and they're going to find all kinds of UAPs in there if they
Wow.
wanted to. And they probably not want to, because they're focusing primarily on what's now. So, and also they're ignoring all this civilian reporting, and they should not ignore that. And I think they're saying, well, we want to work with these civilian organizations. Look, Dr. Kirkpatrick co-authored a report with Dr. Avi Loeb, and the key word there was mothership.
That was
Mothership.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. So yeah, I think one of the things that AARO would be doing in order to resolve these objects, and that's all they're doing, just resolving. That is, what are they and who should be looking at them? That's the resolution. They're not trying to disclose anything. It's not a disclosure office. So forget about having any future congressional hearings about disclosure. And I know UFO Twitter gets spun up every time a hearing's announced. Oh, we're going to get disclosure, or maybe not. This isn't about disclosure. It's about resolution. That is, please identify what's flying in our airspace, and then come to some agreement as to the identity of that. But they're not going to disclose it's UAPs or whatnot. It's not a UAP task force type of thing, but they do look at UAPs. So it's resolution. And then who does it belong to? So say, yeah, these are interesting and we need to study these. This is someone else's problem. So they can look at it because they have more expertise. They have the resources and they have the people to look at it. And then the others are like, gee, extraterrestrial. Did people catch that he used the word extraterrestrial in his briefing? He did.
Yes.
Go look back at those transcripts. And he categorized 3 categories, and the last one was extraterrestrial. So that's a hint about what he's looking at.
It is interesting. He also said they have no credible evidence of extraterrestrial or off-world technology.
Let's translate that. He has no credible evidence of these objects coming from tens of light years or hundreds of light years away. And that's his way of saying, sometimes when we detect these objects, they're coming out of the water on our planet, going back into the water on our planet, or coming out of a landmass on our planet. That's not extraterrestrial, that's terrestrial. So what he's saying, let's interpret that. I'll interpret it for Dr. Kirkpatrick, we have no evidence that these objects are coming to us from tens or hundreds of light years away. Zeta Reticuli, the grays supposedly come from Zeta Reticuli, and that's 39 light years away. He's saying we have no evidence that they're coming from 39 light years away. What he didn't say, and if I was Senator Gillibrand, I would have followed that up and said, well, they're not extraterrestrial. Could they be ultra-terrestrial? Are they coming from the Earth? Are they coming from the oceans or from the landmass? Are they popping out over the Arctic Circle and going into Antarctica? Talk about that, and they didn't raise that question at all.
Yeah, you mentioned as well when you first came online is that these orbs, basically there was tracking of these orbs through some sort of infrared. I guess what can you talk about the orbs?
Very gingerly, I can talk about infrared because those sensors are still flying up there, right? But for a long time, we looked at structured craft. That's what we saw. And some of them were like captured on radar. We had radar evidence of structured craft. We have eyewitness reports of structured craft. But there were also what I call light energy orbs because their signatures tend to be either invisible light that humans can see. For some reason, 600 nanometers or orange seems to be very popular to bandwidth within the light spectrum to see these, and also infrared, which we can feel infrared, but we not necessarily see infrared, at least humans can. But these sensors can see both electro-optical and infrared imagery. And so when we start placing these type of sensors into orbit, that's when we start seeing these objects within view of the sensor. Now, to be clear, these sensors are in low Earth orbit, and some of them are in what we call a high elliptical orbit. So, at one part of the Earth, it's really close to the Earth, and then the other part of the Earth, it flies really high, and then it comes back down Earth. So the high part, the high elliptical, there's more time on target, more dwell on the target, real high. So you can determine that, okay, that's the part of the orbit over the parts of the Earth that we're interested in. So that would be like the Eastern Hemisphere, over Russia, over China, for example. That's where the high part comes in, and then it comes low. And the low part might be where the downlink stations are, where they dump the data. So you want to be low for that and high for the actual collection of the data. And I can...
Yeah, to transfer the data faster.
Yeah.
And it makes sense.
Yeah.
Your geosynchronous...
there's a network of data satellites that relay the data. So basically internet hubs in space, if you will. So you can get a little hub and extend your network, and you can have like a little mesh network. When we had the sensor capabilities, that's when we started seeing the orbs. And I can say that much.